Hey y'all, and welcome to the kitchen. Today we're going to talk about something very important, and that is kitchen safety. We're going to go over some of the top most important things that you need to remember to stay safe in the kitchen. So first things first, we're going to talk about having clean hands. Yeah, you want to wash your hands before you begin to cook anything. You want to make sure there's all germs gone off of your hands before you touch any of your food. You also want to make sure that you always wash your hands after you've touched any kind of poultry, meat, or eggs. Anything that's considered raw, you want to thoroughly wash your hands with soap and water after you've used them. The next thing we want to talk about is knife safety. Now, we've had a full lesson on knife safety because that is a very big deal in the kitchen. Hardly anything gets cooked without getting chopped first. We want to remember with knife safety, we keep our fingers curled under while chopping, we take our time, and the sharp knives are always the safest knife. You also want to remember to have the right tool for the job. The next thing we need to talk about is cleaning your cutting boards. Now, whenever you've cut meat on your cutting board, you always want to wash that or just switch it out before you cook something different. So if you're going to cut a vegetable, you want to cut your vegetables on a different cutting board or after you've washed yours thoroughly. The next thing we want to talk about is washing your produce. I love to wash my produce when I get home from the grocery store. Now, that doesn't include berries and herbs. Those are things that you're going to want to wash right before you use them. But everything else, from cucumbers to apples and oranges, even stuff that you don't eat the peeling, it's important to wash it before you use it because we have our hands on the exterior, and you may put your hands in your mouth. And if you don't know where your produce has come from, and even if you do, you may be touching something that you don't want to consume. My suggestion is this: wash your produce in warm water in the kitchen sink with a cup of vinegar. So you'll fill your sink up with a few inches of water over your produce, add a cup of vinegar in your water. You'll zhuzh it around a little bit with your hands, make sure it's good and mixed together, and you can just wash your produce, sit it on the counter to dry, and drain all the dirt away. That's my best tip for the cleanest produce. The next thing we want to talk about is fire safety. Now, you say fire safety, what are you talking about? Fire safety is a big deal in the kitchen because you're dealing with heat. So what we need to know about fire safety is, number one, you never ever put water on a flame and you never fan it. Water will increase the size of your flame when you have grease. So what you want to do is you want to either smother your fire with a stainless steel lid or a towel, or you want to smother it with baking soda. Pouring baking soda on your fire will make it completely diminish in no time. Another thing you want to remember is you want to have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen, and you also want to make sure that you know how to use it. I would say this: if you have a child in the kitchen, this is for you parents, under the age of 18, I wouldn't go too far while they're learning these skills, just in case you need to hop in and give some assistance. Another tip is to quickly turn your heat off. When you have a fire, the first things that you need to do is make sure no more heat is in contact with your food or your pan. So if it's in the oven, we turn our oven off. If it's on the stove, we turn our stove off. If it's on the grill, we turn the grill off, and then we proceed. If the fire is too large for you to handle, which if you have any doubts, take this high road, call 911. Next thing is we need to have properly fitting clothes while we're in the kitchen. Anything with dangly sleeves is not safe over the stove. You also want to have feet that are safe. So I don't recommend wearing flip-flops or many open-toed things in the kitchen, simply because if something falls on your foot, it could be burning you or it could be really heavy. Flip-flops could also make you trip with a handful of something really hot or really heavy that you have a plan to serve later. Another thing that we want to make sure you pay attention to is your handles on your pot. When you have a handle, you always want it to be away from your other burners that are on, and you want it to be away from the front of your stove. This is a very big no-no. Whether you have small children or not, you could even knock this off the stove and really injure yourself or someone else. So this is the way you want to keep your lids, facing towards the back or the side, away from another burner that's on. So if you have something on this back burner, you're not going to put it completely to the back, you're going to put it to the side. If I had something over here on this burner, that wouldn't be a safe place for me to have my handle. But right now it's totally off, it is safe. So you just want to remember no heat under your handles, and you also want to remember no handles out where someone could hurt themselves, knock the food off and get burned. The next thing we need to remember is your pots and pans will have grease in them occasionally. This is a little bit of fire safety as well. Never reheat that grease to try to clean it out. That's very dangerous, and definitely don't ever walk away from hot food or grease and go do something far. You always want to have a very close eye on whatever you're doing in the kitchen. If you've got grease, wipe it out with a paper towel and just throw it in your trash can. The next thing we want to talk about is always using pot holders if you have stainless steel pans. My pans that are stainless steel or my pans that are cast iron, I'll show you what I mean. They all have a handle that eventually will get hot. The heat is conducted from here to here over time. So even if this is used on the stove top, the heat can conduct and move backwards onto your handle and burn you. So what I recommend is if you're using cast iron, I like to use a pot holder. And I take this pot holder, specifically does perfect. It has a pocket, and I slide it like this. If I don't have one with a pocket, I'm careful to keep this away from other heat, but I just place that there and leave it. This reminds me that this is a hot handle. I need to be careful not to touch it. Now, anytime they go in and out of the oven, you kind of already know it's hot, just like a hot pan out of the oven or a hot casserole dish. You remember more frequently to use the pot holder on your handle. But in this case, you want to just use it on the stove top too, and that goes for cast iron and stainless steel. Another thing that you want to remember is if there are small dogs, cats, or small children in your house and they are underfoot, don't move anything hot or heavy until they have gotten to a safe side of the house or sat at the dinner table. The last thing we need is children under our feet or doggies under our feet and tripping and having a big fall and losing all of dinner or possibly hurting someone even worse. Another thing that we need to remember while practicing kitchen safety is to never set hot glass on a cold surface. Glass can handle heat, but when the hot meets the cold, glass shatters. So if you have a hot jar of stock, say for instance, and you put it immediately on a cold granite countertop or even in the fridge, it could shatter instantly. So you want to avoid hot going into cold, especially with glass. Another thing that you want to remember is to never use metal on non-stick or cast iron pans. If I'm using my cast iron or a non-stick pan, a metal spoon or spatula would scrape the bottom and both ruin your pan, and in the case of non-stick, it could release some dangerous chemicals into your food and ultimately into your body. So what we want to use with cast iron and non-stick is always wood or plastic. So here I am saying what my preference is. It's totally up to you. I love wood. I have plastic. Occasionally I grab it. But if I have my preference, the first thing I'm going to grab is the good old wooden spoon. And I've got to be honest, I probably have 5 or 6. Just because you never can have enough, in my opinion. Once my 5 or 6 have been used and they're in the dishwasher, that's when you see me grabbing my plastic. So the last thing I want to tell you is make sure whenever you're cooking, you want to stir and flip away from your body. So for instance, if I have a piece of chicken in my pan and I'm going to flip it, I'm going to take my spatula and I'm going to flip it away from myself. So let me show you a little closer. So this pan is not hot. I've got it on the stovetop. I'm going to put my spatula under my food and flip away. Even to the side, if you need to flip to the side. You never want to flip towards you because the grease from your pan could splash and get on you and burn you. I've done it a few times. Another thing in that vein is to stir gently as well and not towards you. So you never want to scoop and stir this way. You want to stir in a slow motion just like this. So these are some safety tips in the kitchen. I want you to remember all of these. You may want to actually get a notepad and write them down until you really familiarize yourself. Another thing we're going to talk about later is a few more things to do with food safety, but these are the best kitchen safety tips that you're going to need to remember to keep you safe in the kitchen. Happy cooking, y'all.